We're so thrilled to see everybody here and to have such great energy in the room. It's a really special evening for all of us. My name is Michelle Mater. I'm the Assistant Professor of Media Studies and Film and the Associate Director of the School for Undergraduate Studies here at the New School. And it's really my pleasure and honor to be able to bring this evening to you. But of course, it doesn't come without a lot of help. And there's many people in the room who've been here helping all along the way, who I'd like to acknowledge. And do not raise your hands when I acknowledge you. As you know, these kinds of events take a lot of help, and they're always a labor of love. And tonight is a really special event for a lot of us here whose careers were changed by the film you're going to see tonight, whose lives were changed in some regard. And it's all due to one person who's here in the room with us, Miss Julie Dash. Julie! I'm gonna get to AJ, don't worry, I saw him come in. And we're also thrilled to have the co-producer and director of cinematography, Mr. Arthur Jaffa. Hey. So I hope everybody understands what I was trying to do tonight. There's people in the room, how many people have seen this film once? How many people have seen this film 10 times? How many people have never seen this film? Aha! This is what this evening is for. This evening is for you, because you have quite a treat ahead of you. And the idea was to introduce this film to at least one, if not two generations of filmmakers, film enthusiasts, students who have not seen this film or have not seen it on the big screen, perhaps. Because back in 1992, when KJM3 released this film with Kino International, is Gary here yet? Gary Palmucci? He's coming later. We're going to have Kino, someone from Kino Lorber here with us as well. You guys weren't even around. You may not have even been thought of in some instances, so we're very glad that you're here to see the film with us this evening. This evening also sort of commemorates our second Remixed and Remastered Film Conference. How many people were here last year for that? Yes, okay, awesome. This is our second installment, which we started last year as a forum to encourage network building, as well as to focus on enhancing distribution opportunities for filmmakers of color. And as I said earlier, it also marks this 20th anniversary of the groundbreaking film that we all have come to know and love. And so I'm going to make a couple of quick introductions, but let me first say thank you to all of the volunteers around the room who are working with us tonight. Carrie Davis, who just jumped up, was getting with my camera in her hand, wave your hand. Angela Bankhead, Angela. Pam Tillis, who's outside and is never, absolutely ever in the room, but I could never do all these programs without her. She's amazing. She's our Director of Public Programs. Who else is in the room? Joe, our AV technician, and Joe Violette, another student of mine who's volunteering tonight. Tamika Durham, who's sitting out front. Nada Martinez, my partner with Creatively Speaking, and on and on and on. All my colleagues, friends, everybody who's here. I'm so happy to have you here. So without any further ado, let's get this evening started. Please, if you haven't moved into the middle or left some room on the end, because people are still going to come in, I know, please do so. And I'd like to introduce our Vice Dean of the New School for Public Engagement, Kathleen Breidenbach.
Thank you. I'm actually very honored that Michelle asked me to introduce this evening. As Michelle said, I'm Kathleen Breidenbach, Vice Dean of the New School for Public Engagement. We are very pleased to be hosting this celebration of the 20th anniversary of Daughters of the Dust and to welcome its filmmaker, Julie Dash. This celebration is one of the lead-off events in recognition of Women's History Month and recognizes the film's importance as the first film to be theatrically released that was written, directed, and produced by an African-American woman. This is also, as Michelle noted, and she took my line, the second installment of Remixed and Remastered, so welcome also to Remixed and Remastered Volume 2. a conference that was originated by Michelle Mater, to whom we also owe some thanks for Daughters of the Dust, and that her company, KJM3 Entertainment Group, see, she stole my lines, along with Kino International, spearheaded the marketing of Daughters of the Dust and designed and implemented its distribution and marketing strategy. Remixed and Remastered is a conference series intended to bring together industry professionals, film students, filmmakers, and the community to bring greater awareness to the issues confronting the distribution of media by filmmakers of color. The New School for Public Engagement is pleased to host this event, in particular because of our commitment to the support, recognition, and representation of diverse voices, much as this film continues to do 20 years after its release. Our School of Media Studies is integral to the kind of scholarship that went into the making of this film. So now, let me introduce the Chair of Media Studies and Film, Barry Salmon.
Well, Kathleen was complaining about lines. Now I have absolutely none left. But I do want to welcome you all this evening on behalf of the School of Media Studies and Film. And my name is Barry Salmon. I'm the chair. And a special welcome to Julie Dash and AJ back in the back, who co-produced this well-known picture. Has it really been 20 years? Is what amazes me. But it has. My warmest thanks got to Michelle. Thank you, Michelle, for once again. I don't know how many of you were here last year, but it was a phenomenal event. Went 2 days. It was wonderful. It's so great to see this happening here. And I do want to thank a couple of other folks. First of all, our great panel, which includes Michelle, Tracy Ann Williams, co-colleague here at New School for Public Engagement, Catherine Brower, Marlon Adams, and Mark Walton. And Gary Palmucci from Kino Lorber. Richard Lorber taught here, by the way, in 1998 to I can't remember when, but I do remember being a chair of the undergraduate program back then. And also to Grace Blake and to our friend and colleague Fabio Parisecoli. So without further ado, I want to turn it back over to Michelle, and I want to thank you all for coming out. We really look forward to this evening. Thank you.
I have to also say a welcome in absentia for our executive dean, David Scobie, who couldn't be here this evening, but without his help and support, we would not be able to have made this evening possible. So thank you, David, without your being here. So while our roasters line up, although they look like they're already done that, I'm so proud of you. Gosh, herding cats, you did a good job, Mark. I'd like to make a bit of an announcement that's pretty significant, I think, and appropriate for this audience. And this is the way that we're connecting the work that we did at Remixed and Remastered last year to what we're doing here with today's event. And that is that we have made, indeed, some significant progress towards our overall goal of bringing more exposure to the work of independent media makers of color. Excuse me. And I'm very excited to announce that we have finally secured a permanent home for this work in an amazing studio called Mist Studios and Cinemas on 116th Street between 5th and Lenox Avenues. And our CEO of Mist Studios is actually here with us, Roland Laird. Roland, stand up, please. Yay. Our new best friend for independent cinema. That's Roland, so make sure you introduce yourselves. The cinemas are opening in July of 2012, and even more amazing, Creatively Speaking and Autonomous Entertainment are going to be partnering as the part of the film programming team. That means that Creatively Speaking will have a permanent home. And Kojo, do you remember last year when you made that statement? Kojo, you predicted it. There you go. And it's not without some long-term real commitment by Carlton Brown, who's the developer of this project, as well as Roland. Carlton couldn't be here this evening, but Carlton and I have been working on this for 16 years. So it's an overnight success 16 years later. And I also like to introduce briefly our my business partner and New School alumni, Cedric Beasley, who's my partner with Autonomous Entertainment. Cedric, everybody knows Cedric. And Alexa Birdsong, who also was here at the New School for a brief moment. Did Alexa come? Oh, she couldn't be here. But Alexa is the director of programming for MIST and also has a little something to do with the New School. So you see, it's all come full round circle, and we're really thrilled. So now, to start our roast for the evening, I have our cultural grassroots ambassador of New York City, without whom Daughters of the Dust would never have been such a success, Mr. Kojo Ade, who's going to do a libation for us.
Thank you so kindly, Michelle. I'm so humbled just remembering all of this and being blessed to be a part of it today, and seeing Michelle and all of these individuals who I was blessed to be a part of the team back 20 years ago are still in the vanguard of creating new works, introducing new women filmmakers, in particularly of color, which we were committed to that 1,000-fold with Julie's work and Uzan Palsy and Ayoka Chinzira and all those other great sisters who came out back then with work. It was always, they need to be on the world platform, and we need, as men of conscious and sensitivity and wisdom, to support them and make sure their work got out. So as in our tradition, and people like Haile Garima, who we worked with Sankofa and all those brilliant independent voices that came out from throughout the diaspora and certainly on the mother continent. In our tradition, we always begin in celebrations and deaths and births and weddings and all kinds of life experiences and pouring libation and asking our elders and our Creator to guide us and keep us strong and keep us in the work of those who went on and left the work for us to do continuously while we're here on earth. I don't know who may be the elders in this room, but if there's anyone here that's, let's say, over 70, I would like to ask them, is it in their good faith that we continue with this blessing of, and I trust my dear sister Grace, I could come to her and get her permission to go forward and ask for our Creator and our ancestors to bless us. And we go in the 4 directions of Mother Earth. And we start off with the north. And when I pour the water, I would like for all of you who may not know the endear term of gratitude to our Creator in the Yoruba tradition, Ashe, that you would say Ashe when I call, when I put the water in and go to the 4 directions of our earthly experience here. The gratitude from our dear Creator, whatever name you may want to call, Mother God, Father God, Olodumare, we ask for your blessings this day to keep us all healthy and creative and focus on peace and justice and goodwill for all the family and creation on Mother Earth. Ashe. We ask you and our ancestors to continue to bring her back home to us, because she is from New York City. She, like myself, are products of projects. Her in Queensbridge and myself in the Harlem River projects, which uniquely speaking, both our projects was built the same year. Her projects that she grew up in maybe a month or so before. There's some contentions there about this, historically. But I was told one time that that project was built a month before the Harlem River in 1936 by the late President Delano Roosevelt. So we thank the Creator and our ancestors, Julie, for bringing you back home to us here in New York City. Shade to the south. To the east, we thank the Creator and our ancestors for bringing all of you here today and keeping you focused that this would be something that you would make a part of your International Women's History Month celebration to be here this evening. Ashe. And to all the women of the planet, and we know, as my mother always say, Mother's Day is every day, and so is Women's History Month every day. So we men must be involved in keeping that in the light of truth and compassion and wisdom, that our mother's DNA flourishes within our very beings. So without those divine spirits, female, we could not be here as men. So we must keep that in our work and in our consciousness, and in showing that compassion and love towards all the sisters on this planet. And a lot of them, excuse the words, right today at this very moment is catching hell. So we want to change that paradigm to make sure in the future and the children coming up that they'll know that the women of their generation is living in a paradise of heaven on earth at that moment. Ashe. So I'm not going to take much more time, but I just want us to say thank you. Wait, can't leave this one out. We have been hit devastatingly since 2012 of some great individuals who were particularly known for their work in the arts, whether it was drama, like the late, great Dick Anthony Williams and Sullivan Walker and Hazel Medina and our great vocalist Whitney Houston, and the late, great poet and artist and historian Luis Rios Rivera, who just died a week ago today. And I know you could name some members in your families. So we must take that as being the closing to bring forth those energies of all of those dear people. And I was blessed, and I would be remiss in any way to have met them and talked to them and worked with most of them, that I would not acknowledge their humanity and their creative genius of God. So we must remember them. And I know people got family members. I mean, I've been hearing so many different stories. It's just a must that we acknowledge those energies and those life beings that walked amongst whoever they were connected to, and certainly they were connected to us as human beings. So I would like to, on that one, we say 3 times Ashe to all of those ancestors whose footwork we walk in, whose them building the bridge that carries us across every day, that we honor them, and in this moment of this beautiful celebration for this wonderful woman and artist and sister and friend to many of us, we recall and remember all those souls that names, some I can't even remember or know, but we will remember them now, and showing the love and respect we have for their life work on this planet. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. No further ado, back to our wonderful mistress of ceremonies, Miss Michelle Matea.
Thank you so much, Coach O. So, we now begin our roast. And because I'm up here with the microphone, I get to go first. The idea is these are quick tidbits of how we were involved with daughters or what daughters meant to us. And just so that you the younger people in the room or the people who've never seen, hi Kaveri, people who've never seen the film can get an idea and a glimpse of what this film has meant to us over the last 20 years. Daughters of the Dust, when Catherine, Mark, and Marlon and I sat down in the theater at the Anthology Film Archives, I could not stop crying. And I could not stop crying because this story was our story. And I'm going to start crying again. I didn't want to do that. Anyway, this film really set the stage for everything that I do today. It really did. And thanks to Julie and AJ, we have this to document ourselves and to continue to bring other generations to this work. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Raquel Gates. I'm an assistant professor of cinema studies at the College of Staten Island. I first saw Daughters of the Dust when I was a master's student, but I didn't fully get it until 2010, which is a bit late. And I'll tell you why, because you spoke at the Society for Cinema and Media Studies in the LA Rebellion workshop. And while you were speaking, one of my colleagues leaned forward and whispered in my ear, "Man, it's nice when we can feel good about what we do." And as a professor of film studies, I spend a good amount of time teaching undergrads about the myriad of ways that Hollywood gets it wrong over and over and over again. And it is so wonderful, and I feel so blessed to have an example of when someone gets it right. And whether it's Daughters of the Dust or Illusions or any of the, other many films in your prolific career, you have boldly and unapologetically been committed to telling our stories in an industry where, well, let's just say they're not particularly supportive of telling our stories, to put it kindly. So I want to thank you, not only for Daughters of the Dust, but for your commitment to telling our stories through cinema. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Dominga Martin, and I'm a filmmaker. It is an honor to be here. Thank you, Michelle, for having me. Julie, I met you before a few years ago when my short film screened at Real Sisters, and you told me that you enjoyed it and congratulated me, and that meant a lot to me because I always looked up to you. And the year that I graduated high school, Daughters of the Dust was released. And I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew I wanted to be a writer. And so my mother says, "You should see Daughters of the Dust. A woman made it. Her name is Julie Dash." And I thought, that's the dope name. Julie Dash, right? And so I didn't get to see it until I got to college. But when I did, what sticks with me even today is the opening with the family in white, with the white umbrella against the blue sky, moving across the ocean. Daughters of the Dust had so much spirit. It was so captivating and provocative. And I just want to say thank you for using your voice the way you wanted to, for going through the doors without permission and taking your place. Because you have paved the way for me. This is a dream come true because I'm getting ready to direct my first feature film. And it's just an honor to see you before I embark on that journey because you paved the way for me, for Gina Prince Bythewood, for Darnell Martin and Casey Lemons, all the women that I looked up to that came after you. Because without you, there would be no us. So I just want to say God bless you and congratulations on 20 years strong because we're all your daughters in film.
Hi, my name is Shari Carpenter. I'm nervous, so I'm going to read what I wrote. I'm also a filmmaker. In 1986, I saw a film produced and written and directed by a young black man from Brooklyn. You guys might know who that is. It was called She's Gotta Have It, and it literally changed the course of my life. It inspired me to pursue a career in an industry I had never, ever considered a possibility. I knew nothing about being a filmmaker. I knew no one who was a filmmaker or who even worked in the film industry, but I knew it's what I wanted to do. 6 years later, in 1992, again, I was inspired. She's Gotta Have It had a heroine that looked like me, But Daughters of the Dust had something even more powerful. It had someone behind the camera, someone running the show, someone calling the shots, someone making the directions, making the decisions, and she looked like me. And her name was Julie Dash. And seeing her film and seeing her changed my life again. It made something possible in my mind that had not been possible before, being a director. And for that inspiration, I will always be forever grateful to you, Julie, and I thank you for being a woman filmmaker pioneer, a Black woman filmmaker pioneer for people like me and other Black women filmmakers out there.
Hi there, Julie, and thank you. My name is Lisa Collins, and I'm a filmmaker and just all-around media person, and I just have to say impressions. I couldn't come up with full sentences because every time I think of that movie, it was always in streaks of impressions, and the images and the costume design and the hair and the hair and the hair, and how it impacted us all, and how much you infused a certain soul with everything that you touched and all the chemistry. I remember I saw it in film school, and I couldn't really believe there is the energy of a woman. There is all these things coming together and making sense and speaking for years and years. I can still close my eyes and remember the voice of the unborn child, exactly to the pitch, exactly. And I thank you for all of that. I thank you, Julie, for also having a book that I used to refer to all the time in my low moments, for your making of the Daughters book. And it spoke about how it took 16 years. And I have to say, many times I would just flip through that book to just take me through, and to take me through to the next place and know that everything was going to be okay. And lastly, I wanted to say at the time I met you at a national coalition of 100 Black Women event, the thing that stuck out in my head was your utter grace and humility. And I thought, now that's an artist to look up to.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Julie. Hi, AJ. I'm Mabel Haddock, and I was with the National Black Programming Consortium when Julie was doing this film, and Julie and AJ were doing the film, and I had the rather, I guess, dubious pleasure of encouraging the people at PBS to support this film and to put it on the air, and that was a lot of fun. It shook PBS, and I think they've really never recovered from it. In fact, I don't know if they've had a film by another Black director, narrative by another Black director on PBS since these 20 years, but we're still waiting. We're still hoping. And I remember, though, also, and I'm certainly not here to talk about hard times, but I remember the hard times we were having, raising money and making sure that we got this on the air. And so the thing that I want to say to Julie and all of us working and struggling artists is, I just want to wish you prosperity, and I hope you go away today with a pocket full of money. In addition to the love and the money.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Ann Bennett. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and in 1992, I had somewhat recently finished studying film, and because of that, I was working about 3 jobs trying to pay off my student loans. Including working at a video rental store where every single weekend I was out there. Would you like a bag with that? Would you like a bag with that? And at a while, I was getting a little discouraged. I'd spent all this time and money going through college, studying the art, studying the medium, And I was finding it was hard for me to break in. I wasn't making much treadway getting into a national production, getting onto film projects. I had to work to support myself because I couldn't do any free internships. So I was like, what am I going to do? And so I started to do some volunteer work, but then in 1992, I got the inspiration that really made me go on, and that was to see Daughters of the Dust. I remember I was cobbling together my little monies to see it in the theater. I think I saw it in the theater maybe 5 or 6 times, full price, full price. And every single time, like as the other speakers, I just cried. I wept to see the images, to hear the words, and just to be enveloped by just the beauty of the cinematography and the story. And I've continued to sort of follow your career, Ms. Dash, from a distance, but as a fan. And I have to say, you've really continued to inspire myself and really all of my peers. And especially, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, you were on a panel at the DGA. And I have to say, it was a very frank panel and an inspirational panel, but it was an honest panel. And I have to say, I was so impressed by how open you were to share your experiences as a filmmaker, your successes and the travails as well. But that honesty and that openness throughout has really meant a lot to myself and to my peers. And I just want to say thank you for the work that you've done as an artist, but then the work you've done as a woman, as an inspiration to us all. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Robin Hayes. I'm a professor in nonprofit management and media studies and international affairs here at the New School, and I'm also a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker. And 20 years ago, I was a college student at NYU, and I used to commute to the East Village every day, all day, and night. I had 2 lives. I had the life that I had when I was like cute and a teenager and interesting and creative here in the East Village. And then I had my family life in East New York, which was, I had a multiracial life in the city, and I had my Black life that I felt like was totally different. My grandmother is from South Carolina. I lived with my grandparents, and when Daughters of the Dust came out, she was like, I want to go see a movie. It's called Daughters of the Dust, and it's playing on 2nd Avenue and 12th Street, and I would like to go on Thursday at 6 p.m. So, right? So I was like, okay, I guess we're going to this movie. And so seeing Daughters of the Dust in the theater, there were a lot of grandmothers and aunts and young women and all generations, all different colors, all different types of Black people together. Well, not really people, women together. And I think it all helped us understand each other better. And, I'll never forget sitting next to my grandmother and saying, did my grandmother ask me to go see a movie and there's a lesbian couple in the movie? When does that ever happen? Is this happening? Are they together? So I really appreciate so much how, and being at the New School, let's face facts, we don't see so many of us in a room together. Excited to see something that reflects us and our experience, and it informs so much of what I try to do with my own work, and I'm glad to see us all here. I'd like to see more of you more often. I'm Robin, 72 Fifth Avenue, 5th floor. Thank you so much. Thank you, Julie Dash.
Hi, I'm Melissa Friedling. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Programs in Film and Media in the School of Undergraduate Studies and Media Studies. And I'm here to say thank you to Julie Dash, who I only just met today, and I feel humbled because she is a hero. I am embarrassed because when I got to shake her hand, I was covered with smart food dust, but apologies. I feel lucky to have this film in our lives because I get to show it in classes and it gets to inspire me as a filmmaker. When I showed in classes, students have the same reaction that I had the first time I saw it, was I've never seen anything like this. I've never followed a story like this. And it's when I saw this film, I guess it's actually 21 years ago, because I was in New York. I had a false memory problem when I saw it was 20 years, but I know I was in New York then, and I must have seen an anthology. And up until that time, I was one of those young women filmmaking students who had seen a Maya Deren film, and that changed my life because of the way of the imagery and the storytelling. And then when I saw Julie's film, it changed it all over again. And I thank you for that, and I thank you for being able to show it to students over and over again. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Terry Lawler. I'm from New York Women in Film and Television. You know, I had to schlep to the theater to try to see this film 4 times before I got in. You know, you couldn't go online and just order your tickets and get a seat. You had to go, and then you had to go the next time earlier, and then earlier, a half hour, an hour. You know, it was, you know, but I was determined, and it was certainly worth it. I finally went at 11 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday, and I got in, and the place was packed. It was packed with women of all kinds, and it was amazing. And I was moved by it then, and I still am. It was so unique and magical and beautiful, and it was so wildly successful. I thought, okay, this is a new day. Julie has proven what women can do, what women of color can do, and that women will come out and see the work. And I thought, 20 years or so, women will be directing 50% of the films that come out. Well, that didn't happen, but it's not Julie's fault, and if you want to know whose fault it is, see me after. Thank you, Julie.
My name is Shala Lynch, and I'm a filmmaker, a director, and a producer. And when I saw Daughters of the Dust, I had no idea I would be a filmmaker. I thought that only really super crazy people ever did this. And I was in a theater, and the images, the beauty and the grace and the realness of the images impacted me. And then I didn't think about it again. Years later, when I thought about becoming a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker, they stayed with me. And I think that's the power of the work that you've created, and that's the power of you as a director. You know, you don't know when things will have great meaning for you in your life, but I had the context and the reference. And when I thought about being a filmmaker, I never doubted it. I never thought, well, I can't because there's no one out there that doesn't look like me. And so that power is important, and so I celebrate you for that, and thank you for maintaining your commitment and for coming out to speak and being there for all of us and the generations. Thank you, Julie.
I had to integrate this a little bit. Certainly being blessed to be a part of the creative team, and then remembering with Julie that we had met in a film program in Harlem at the first studio museum in Harlem. They had a community film program. And she reminded me that that's where we had met at, let alone being students in the city in the SEEK program and so forth. But, you know, Daughters of the Dust impacted a lot of males. It impacted me when I seen the film. It made me that much more passionate and determined to not only share this gem with women, but with all the men that I knew and brothers who I didn't know. So this film answered for a lot of brothers. I don't care what particular ethnicity they may be under the human family, but I would say in particularly those of us of African ancestry looked for this type of beauty in the images of American media, whether it's television and film. And so Julie broke through and showed us that we can look beautiful in different hues of the rainbow of the beauty of African women in the world. And so that answered a yearning that us brothers was looking to have. And those of us who were in the cultural movement, we were working towards that, you know, with the teachings of people like Amiri Baraka and Ilambe Braff and others who were in the Black arts movement here in the city and in Harlem. That was always their narratives, that showing the images of African women in their royalty and their divinity was a must, and we should be in the vanguard of encouraging that and making that happen. So Julie's work opened up that paradigm more for us to show that it was possible and that we should continue to make it possible. And all my sisters and females, I got them to come, and they were all crying, and we were all crying together in the theater. So I thank you so much. God bless you.
And we have our last roaster of the evening, who is special to me, special to Julie, special to a lot of people in this room. And that is Ms. Pearl Bowser.
I can't match the eloquence of the speakers that came before me, but I can tell you one thing. I was there when she first began this project. We were together at, I think it was Robert Redford. They had done a special, it was a retreat before Sundance became Sundance. Women directors were invited. I don't know how I got there because I was not a director, but I took somebody else's place. But I am forever grateful for whatever time I've had to spend with Julie Dash. I was always interested in film, but I was more interested in history. I wanted to know, who am I? Where did I come from? And what is there that I need to be proud of, right? And, you know, in studying, not studying, but just pursuing the history of independent African-American filmmakers, I stumbled on a sprinkling of women working in the 1900s. They never got any credit for it. And I don't think any of their films ever existed. I mean, existed in a real way that Julie Dash's films have gone. They were presented to a public, and they had a life of their own. They hung on. But with Julie's film, just the memory of it is what lingers most with me. And I cannot imagine that period in my life when I was trying to find out who I am, you know, as a Black woman, and what is my culture, what is the meaning of me as an African American. And with Julie Dash's film, the language was there. The fact that we are global people came forward in her film. And also, I was able to connect with the characters on the screen because some of them were my neighbors. You know, people speaking different languages. They were French, they were Gullah people, and I had never really placed a great deal of attention to the differences among us. But Julie Dash's film kind of laid it out like a carpet, you know, and it was brilliant. I mean, you could see the definitions. You could feel the definitions. You could hear the definitions. And when I say I was kind of, it wasn't personal. And I don't like using that line, I discovered. I didn't discover it. It was there. It was there for everybody to take in. I took it in at the same time as some people did. I just had an opportunity to know and to connect directly with Julie Dash. And I'm forever grateful to her for the vision that she gave me of who I am and who I could be. I'm not a filmmaker, but I'm very interested in film, and I'm very interested in the connection between the culture and whatnot and film. And it is our teachers. I mean, film is a great educator. And the fact that we are now in control, and I say that without, you know, bragging, control of those images of us on the screen, we know the truth of who we are. And we will be forever grateful to someone like Julie, and hopefully all the people who come after her or who have connected with her will carry that message, will want to imitate what she has done. They will be telling our story in reality, not Hollywood, but in reality. And they will be making our culture what it really is. It's a global culture. We are a global people. And we can trace our ancestries way, way, way back. And it's important for us to know that because we're not just here. Slavery didn't make us. Slavery didn't destroy us. Slavery lifted us in a way that her film kind of gives you that information about that you don't get in the history books. You know, I mean, what did the people who came, I'm going on too long. But thank you, Julie. Thank you.
For those of you who don't know Miss Pearl Bowser, she's our Oscar Michaud Scholar, amongst many other things, and she has several books out that you should read and know. She was also the first person to bring African film here to the United States and distribute it, so another inspiration to us. And now, without further ado, I have to bring up the guest of the evening, our dear friend and colleague, Julie Dash.
Needless to say, I'm somewhat overwhelmed by all of this, so thank you so much. But I just want to add, before I forget, before I blank out up here, thank you, Miss Pearl Bowser, because you probably don't remember, but I did a work study, a summer work study with St. Clair Bone at Chamba Productions when I was 21. And you were there, and you were articulate, and you were sophisticated, and you had all the histories. And I just was floored by you and Kathleen Collins Prettyman. You guys were my idols. You didn't notice me there. I was just a PA, but I remember you. So I was raised by a wide variety of very talented people here in New York and the writers that, you know, I was just telling Angela, who was interviewing me earlier today, like, well, what inspired you when you were growing up? And I was inspired by the Black literature and wanting to see that come alive on the screen. And I know I'm supposed to be introducing the film. Hey, David, how you doing? And all the different people. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for coming out. Thank you, AJ, for making this film a reality, and Michael Kelly Williams for bringing your wonderful artwork into it, and Ishmael Houston Jones standing there just because we just always wanted to dance like you, even though you weren't in the movie. It's just that so many people here that enriched our lives and made me who I am, and even, you know, Brother Kojo from the Sikh dormitory on 71st Street and Broadway, yuck. But it was, but we learned so much there. And then after making this film and then having Michelle and Mark and Catherine and Marlon come and start distributing it in their unique, wonderful way. And then all of a sudden, here comes Brother Kojo. I hadn't seen him in maybe 10, 15 years, our grassroots promoter. So this project, as well as most of the things that I've ever worked on, has been embellished and imbued with so much love and diversity and magic in many ways. The magic of the time that I came out of, that I grew up in New York. And so I'm rambling, so let's just look at the movie, and I'll be here to talk about it afterwards. But thank all of you roasters and Michelle, and I'm just overwhelmed by all this. Let's go. Let's see the movie.
So we will now enjoy Daughters of the Dust. Please feel free to get some popcorn and chips and water over here to hold you over till we can have some real food at the end. Enjoy. So, yes, amazing, amazing film, right? Hi, Edie. How are you? We are going to take a minute now. If people need to do a really quick bathroom break, feel free. But we're going to really try and get the panel going quickly because I know people are starving too, and we have actually some decent food from our catering here in-house. No, come on, Pat. Be real now. Gumbo on a new school budget? I don't think so. No. But we do have some tasty surprises for you. So I'd like to start getting our panelists organized to join us up on the stage. If you could come forward, as you may. I will start introducing us, so we'll have that part done. Unfortunately, Tulani Davis, who was supposed to co-moderate with me, could not make it at the last minute. She had a car emergency. So unfortunately, she sends her regrets. And for those of you who don't know Tulani Davis's work, you should. She's an amazing writer, cultural critic. Her bio is in the program, so you can take a look at that. But now I'd like to bring to the stage my cohorts and partners in crime for KGM3 Entertainment Group, Marlon Adams, Mark Walton, and Catherine Bowser. You're going to be on this side. You can go on that side. Yeah, you guys go on that side. Catherine, where's Catherine? Catherine. She must be out of the room. She's on her way. Okay, and also on the distribution side, we have with us Gary Palmucci from Kino Lorber. Gary, come on down, who worked with us intensely, maybe sometimes against his will, but he did it without begrudging us at all. Thanks for coming, Gary. Here's Catherine. Come on up, Catherine. And then we're going to have our filmmakers and scholars on the other side of the table. So can my dear colleagues Fabio Parasecoli and Tracy Ann Williams join me up here, as well as Leslie Harris and Grace Blake. You're on this side of the table. And leave 2 chairs in the middle for our stars of the evening. Are they in the room? Are they in the room? Not yet. Arthur Jaffer and Julie Dash. Here she comes. Come on in. You guys are in the middle. So Mark is going to co-moderate with me in Tulani's absence. And we really want to open it up for questions from the audience as quickly as possible. So we're going to make this part rather informal and to the point. Marlon Adams is an entertainment attorney representing producers, writers, and directors in film, music, television, and theater. He was one of the co-founders of KGM3 Entertainment Group, and he was responsible for overall strategic planning, drafting, and negotiating all contracts related to acquisition, distribution, and licensing. He has also created and executive produced a biography series with Sam Pollard called Journeys in Black for BET. And next to Marlon is Catherine Bowser. Catherine, and for those of you who don't know, Catherine actually was my co-founder of Creatively Speaking 17 years ago. Catherine was the co-founder of KGM3 as well. And she's also worked with the Foundation for Independent Video and Film, Media Alliance, and MyFadu Films. And she's currently the art director for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and has her own company called Toussaint Creative as well. That's Catherine. And Gary Palmucci is next to Catherine. He's the Vice President of Theatrical Distribution for Kino Lorber Films and has been there since 1987, which was then Kino. We lost our dear founder of Kino just this past year, Don Krim, who we all know and love very much, and we're sad to see him make his transition. But Gary has been integrally involved in the release of dozens of now classic foreign films from such directors as Aki Kaurismäki, Michael Haneke, Wong Kar-wai, Amos Katai, as well as Daughters of the Dust with Julie Dash. And next to Gary is Leslie Harris. Leslie, you probably have known for her film Just Another Girl on the IRT, which was one of the first films after Julie's to be written, directed, and produced by an African-American woman. She is currently working on a new project, which I think she'll tell us about, called I Love Cinema, a satirical comedy about sex, race, and politics in this post-racial society of ours. And next to Leslie is Arthur Jaffa, co-producer and cinematographer of Daughters of the Dust. And Julie is next to Arthur as well. And then we have Grace Blake, who is a producer, filmmaker, renowned for such groundbreaking films as School Days, Silence of the Lambs, and The Wiz, just to name a few. She was the past president of New York Women in Film and Television, and my colleague there, and she's also been a New York Women in Film muse, which we know and love very much. And Fabio Parasecoli, he's the associate professor coordinator of the Food Studies program here at the New School for Public Engagement. And his current work examines food and masculinity in movies and the socio-political aspects of food, international trade, and intellectual property. And Fabio is going to have a new class in the fall on food and film. So hence the connection to this film. And next to Fabio is my dear friend and colleague, Tracy Ann Williams. Tracy Ann is director of our academic advising at the New School for Public Engagement, as well as a faculty member in gender studies and cultural studies. So, who wants to start? No, I think we should give the panelists an opportunity to speak, as the roasters did initially, a little snippet, little soundbite of what Daughters meant to each of you. And you know, we're starting, I'm on this end. I control this end. Mark controls that end.
Why don't we do this just to be gender and functionally sensitive?
Okay.
Why don't we have a creative person speak, and then we'll have a more business-focused person speak.
Oh, there we go. I like that idea. Okay.
There we go.
So that's back to you, Tracy.
Lord, is it?
Very briefly, what does Daughters mean to you?
Do you want me to put in the context of my work?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like a typical academic, I have pages and pages of stuff that I think. So I'm going to collapse what I wanted to say this evening. One of the things that Daughters of the Dust explores is the tension between the potential freedom and socioeconomic progress that migration to the mainland promises, and the benefits of preserving the past through continued geographical and cultural solidarity. In other spaces, these kinds of tensions are represented as simple dichotomies, dualistic things, either or. One way that Daughters troubles that kind of relationship is in introducing the anti-lynching campaign that was running quite rampant in the late 19th, early 20th centuries, that was pioneered by the fierce muckraking efforts of journalist Ida B. Wells. Daughters really focuses on the cultural and historical sensibilities of the Gullah people as represented by the Peasant family. But what is perhaps most important, I assert, is the foregrounding of Black women in this work, and that's where I'd like to focus my comments. Bell Hooks makes a very telling statement in Daughters of the Dust, the making of an African-American woman's film, that works to understand the film's place in American cultural history. She says, "It's interesting that whenever an artist takes a kind of mythic universe and infuses it with aspects of everyday reality, like the images of women cooking, often the cinema audience in this society just isn't prepared." Daughters challenges commonplace notions of Black women's place within the body politic and what Hortense Spillers would call the marketplace of the flesh. So what I'm trying to say is that within a mainstream white feminist concept of womanhood, all women are seen as homogenous, the same, and that certain applications of a homogenous way of looking at Black women are actually detrimental. So the ways in which theorists like Angela Davis have talked about race, gender, and class really tried to unsettle what more traditional or mainstream feminists are saying. What I mean by this is that mainstream feminists suggest that anything related to domesticity and reproduction, cooking, food, are sites of repression And for black women in the 19th century, 20th century, and 21st century, these places, these spaces offer a kind of freedom, solidarity, community, a way of having a space away from the harsh realities of working life. And so I say this to foreground how cooking and the sharing of food is an important way of understanding this film. And I'm sure that Fabio is going to talk more about food, so I'm not even going to go there because that's not truly my area of expertise. But the way in which community rituals and bonding keep traditions and rituals alive, the kinds of community bonding and rituals that were destabilized by the experience of slavery or migration in the United States. The fact that you have 4 generations of the Payzant women depicted in this film is very, very powerful. The fact that Nana Payzant is trying to give something to Eli as he's getting ready to leave, or perhaps to give him direction. And she says something very powerful that I would like to say. I visit with old Payzant every day since the day he died. It's up to the living to keep in touch with the dead. Man's power doesn't end with death. Call on your ancestors, Eli. Let them guide you. I'm trying to teach you how to touch your own spirit. I'm fighting for my life, Eli, and I'm fighting for yours. That's actually what the movie is about. But the fact that women speak these words suggests that women's subjects exist as they are. In a feminist construct, in a traditional mainstream feminist construct, something is wrong with women. But in this film, the women exist as they are. So what Julie does is erase white women as the necessary backdrop against which black women make sense. They make sense as they are. So this is not... So sadly, this is not the domesticity and the experience of black women that is portrayed in Oscar-nominated treacle like The Help. Sorry. I'm sorry. You can go after me when I come off the stage. I'm so sorry. So Daughters narrates the political sensibilities of what Patricia Hill Collins has called the entanglements of market and visual economies. If black women are not placed in relationship to white women, then they exist as they are. And so the film continues to have relevance, continues to comment on the socio-political sense of the black woman's body in and of itself. That's why the film still resonates. And if you'll indulge me, I'm going to go back 20 years as well. I saw Daughters of the Dust when the movie was first released as well, in a little teensy room downtown, even further downtown than we are here. And I saw it alone, and I'm not really sure why. I don't remember why I went by myself, but one of the things that strikes me looking back is that I had no expectations for what I would see, only that I was intrigued about the notion of a film about black people because I had not seen a film about black people. And at the time, I was an NYU student deep into the study of medieval texts and Latin. So let me just say that you might then gather how successful I was long-term in the medieval field. Anyway, the experience of watching this film was visceral for me and a memory that stayed with me. After all of this time, I was literally stunned by the images that I saw of black people, and more specifically black women, and the brightness of the sun, the blue of the sky, the ocean, the sand, the crisp white of their clothes, the rich brown tones of their skin. Also, I found myself really moved by the language and how it was spoken without any kind of apology, let's say. The close-up shots of shrimp, okra, being prepared for gumbo, like I almost wanted to leap out of my chair. So when the movie ended and the lights came up, no one in this packed theater moved. And that never happens. People just sat there. The lights came up, the credits had gone, and people were just sitting there. And so I'd like to think that I wasn't the only one stunned that day, having watched this film. And I'm going to liken it to a description that the writer Toni Morrison gives about one of her characters in the novel Tar Baby. And this character is described as a woman who has no eyelashes. And she doesn't have eyelashes because of what she knows and what she sees. So I would like to offer that the memory and influence of this movie is searing in that kind of way. The force behind the watching of this movie removes the eyelashes of the character in the novel, but it also it stays with you forever, much in the way this woman is eyelashless, if that's even a word. So Daughters, for me, ended up being one catalyst for the direction of the studies that I undertook. Obviously, I'm not a medievalist. And the work that I continue to do today. And so for that, I'm certainly grateful.
Well, I know we're going to hear a lot from the, let's call it the side of the daughter's life where the experience was what it was. But I think the other story that we are very aware of that are part of KGM3 is that history was being made in another way. It was being made because a film had not been distributed this way before, because studios said that you can't distribute films like with no money. And I'd be embarrassed in this day and age to tell people how much money we actually spent on distributing that film.
No, I think we should tell them. Go ahead, tell them, Mark. $150,000.
$151,000, yeah. They grossed over $3 million on 13 screens in 39 weeks. So there's a business school case to be written about that. So I think that, and again, you know, I'm the suit, so I always come up with the suit lines. We have to make sure that we create industries that are self-sustaining from a business perspective. And there's a business story that's there that still needs to be told, remembered, and replicated. So I think that now I'd like to just get a perspective. Marlon, you want to give us some perspective on the daughter's experience, but with maybe some of those aspects to it.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yes, thank you. You know, it brings back memories. I can't believe it's been that long. 20 years is, well, however it is, it's a very long time. But it just seems like yesterday. And I was just talking with Catherine, and I was telling her how I, rarely like to see a movie twice. But naturally, I saw Daughters plenty of times, but a lot of times we were moving and da-da-da-da-da. But this is the first time I had a chance to really sit down again in a long time. And it's just a really virtuoso production. And I think Julie said it best earlier. It was just magical. In the aftermath of all this, I mean, I was a very young attorney when I came out. I was just coming out of law school, really delving into the scene. But more importantly, I was an activist. I was an activist. I was a black activist. I was a person who really was out there and struggling with this notion of, how do we break this cycle of dependency, and it just so happens that the law is associated with business, and I'm not a business person. I was really focused on the infrastructure of business and how you put those things together and how they allow things like this to happen once you've had the infrastructure in place. And so when we saw the film, it was like it was just mind-blowing from that perspective of what you could do to actually create an infrastructure that would allow you to ascribe value to your ideas, your goods, and your services. And that's what it was about for me as in that world of business. And this film, when we saw it, it was just so over the top. And I mean, we had just started coming together, but we were individually involved in a lot of stuff. And Kathy and Michelle were deep into the non-theatrical world and the arts administration world with two of the premier arts organizations, Women Make Movies and AIVF, where I met Catherine. And the whole thing was magical. Just the movie, the coming together of all of us. I mean, really Catherine and Michelle were in the same circle, but Mark and I were not in the same circle, directly. And it was just, I don't really even know how it all happened, but we did it. And it was magical in the sense that it was the right time historically. And it may not have been, when you look back on it as from a business standpoint, and from that whole notion of building an infrastructure of self-sufficiency, it may not have been that moment, but it certainly was the right time for all of us to come together and for us to embark on this effort to, for our motto was, it was three-dimensional images and stories from the African diaspora. And that was going to be the key to the kind of, sort of self-sustaining business infrastructure that would really, set something else off, something post-affirmative action.
Thank you, Marlon. That was awesome.
Michelle,
You want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, perhaps you or Kathy could talk about some of the specifics of what you did that was so different with this particular distribution process. It wasn't just, well, you created all these like junkets. They were more than press junkets. They were distribution junkets where you bust in people, and where we had fashion shows, and right after the fashion show, then we would have the screenings, and it was just something very, very different. Go ahead,
Kathy. Go ahead, Kathy, yeah.
Okay. Again, I just want to echo what everybody said, the roasters, my colleagues up here on the panel, that the moment that Michelle and I sat there and saw Daughters of the Dust and came out as overwhelmed as everybody has described tonight, we knew that something wonderful was going to happen with this film, and then we stand back, and Kino had the film. I'm sure we're going to hear something about Kino's role in it. But we also knew as Black women that this was something that every Black woman needed to see, to be involved in, to be touched by. And how was that going to happen? How would we, do it as individuals? And then we thought, well, let's see what we can do as a business. Let's come together and think about how, if we as Black women were going to hear about this film, we're going to support this film, we're going to get the word out, what would we do? Who would we try to reach? And we sat down and said, let's form this company. We got together with Mark and Marlon again. In 20 years later, I'm not even sure how we all came together, but we did, and we were kind of simpatico, and we met with Julie, and that was an amazing relationship. And so we thought about how we would reach out and what community activities, what grassroots activities, what social activities, what kind of meetings of the mind could we create that would show everybody what we saw with this film and how life-affirming this film could be. And so that's what we did. We sat down and we all made lists. And thinking back on this 20 years later, now in the age of Facebook and
Twitter,
and the ability to get the word out quickly. We were operating in an age when computers had barely been invented. We, had to think about how we could take a little bit of money and really stretch it. Did we mail to people? Did we go talk to groups? We made lists of every single Black activity that was happening in New York City and said, let's get somebody there to talk about this film. And I really have to, again, commend our brother Kojo, who was one of the key people to let us know what was happening, first of all,
Kojo
and to be
Gary
there
Nancy.
himself. And that's what we did. And we were able to get groups of people excited by the film, and they became ambassadors for the film. They would go and get people to the screenings that we had. We didn't really know how it would turn out, and then the most amazing thing, when the film opened, and we went there and saw those lines stretched around the block, we knew it was partly what we did, but it was really actually Julie. It was really actually the film that did it. It wasn't, we provided a structure, as Marlon said, but we were working with something incredible. Mm-hmm. And I think that all of us believing so deeply in it and being willing to work around the clock for it. Not just the four of us, but a whole host of people from different organizations pulled together, particularly Black women, and moving out from there. And through word of mouth, through hard work, combined with that magic, we were able to get those lines around the theater. We were just as amazed as everybody else when that happened.
One thing I just would add is that we opened on Dr. King's birthday, January 15th, 1992, at the Film Forum. And that was back when Dr. King's birthday was not a national holiday. And so we didn't know what was going to happen. And again, it was just sort of coincidental, like, you know, all these things just sort of happened simultaneously. And I think part of the magic and the kismet that everyone's describing is that it was also Dr. King's birthday, and it was freezing cold. And there were Black people lined up around the block outside. So we knew that there was definitely something special, absolutely.
And from a technical perspective, we turned away 2 people for every person that got into the theater that day. So you should realize, you just think about it, freezing cold day. And you know, I'm the storyteller, so I always have these stories. And I remember at the end of the first showing, Julie was standing there, and I mean, it was overwhelming. And I know it was overwhelming for you. And I remember looking at you and saying, I think I need to get you in a cab because these women are going to cut locks of your hair off in a minute.
I do remember you saying that.
Yeah, and it was that kind of overwhelming experience. Let's get some more of our panelists.
Yes, Fabio.
To weigh in, Fabio?
Yeah, as we know, food plays such an important role in this film for all of us, and I'd love Fabio to talk about that.
Actually, I saw this movie just a few months after I moved to the US back in '98. So I was sent here as a food critic to cover the US for an Italian magazine. And somebody tells me, oh, you have to watch that movie. So I rented and I started watching it. And I think it was great that I saw it exactly at that time because I had no preconcept about, you know, what American food is or, you know. And I saw all this happening. And I realized now, looking back, how an influence it had on me in how I approached material culture in this country, in a way. So it was not hamburgers, it was not steak, it was something much more complicated and much more diverse and varied. And that really guided me in my work as a food critic when I was traveling around to the point that I convinced my publisher in Italy to send me to the Low Country to write a story about, you know, the boil and all that. And I started traveling in the islands and write stories about that culture. That said, that's my personal story with Daughters of the Dust. But I think for me it's also very important in different ways. First of all, in the way it represents food, it doesn't use, you know, what we now call food porn. It's just straight up food, people cooking, people eating. There is no sort of hiding. And I think that's beautiful. And the movie was made in '92, where precisely that way of representing food was becoming prevalent. And it makes an enormous difference. And from the content point of view, really, I think it points out how, you know, we can talk about a great Caribbean that goes all the way from South Carolina to Salvador de Bahia. In many ways, and somebody was talking about, you know, the global experience. In many ways, material culture is so similar, that the way food is prepared, the connection with food, certain ingredients, the way people gather around food. That also was very important for me when I started working on food from the academic point of view, and I started traveling into the islands, to the Caribbean, to northeast of Brazil. So in a way, it's a movie that I still like my students to watch, even in a food studies class, because I think in a day where food is so commercial in media, you know, it's everywhere from Top Chef to this brings us back to something really important about food, the personal connections, the emotional connection, and the fact that food can become part of our identity in a very deep and personal way. And that's my 5 cents.
Thank
Cool, cool. All right, we're going to keep flipping it. And I'm going to digress for a quick second because I think that Julie actually brought something out we should talk about. Does anybody remember 1992, 1991? You know, before the internet, all of that? So I want you to keep in your mind exactly how challenging it was for us. Throughout the country, there were major blockbuster movies going on. Actually, we opened the same week as Juice, if I remember correctly. There's big distributors, Warner Brothers, all of these folks that are out there that spend hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of dollars to break movies on the screen. You see commercials coming on network television. You had a handful of theaters, art house theaters. The Angelica was one of those that you know of. Well, we had the Film Forum here in New York. We had the theater up in Boston on Beacon. Was it the Beacon Theater? The Coolidge Corner, thank you. And you had these theaters that just kind of survived with art house films. Didn't really get big crowds. In the Coolidge Corner, I remember where the great story that we tell is that Fantasia was the largest box office seller there until Daughters of the Dust came. Okay, and then I told you the story about the Film Forum. So I want you to just keep that in the backdrop. What you needed in order to get to all of those theaters was a distributor. You needed somebody who actually had relationships with these art house theaters, and that's what we didn't have. Not only did we not have film distribution experience, but we also didn't have that experience. So that's where Kino, where Gary was, really was integral in this whole piece, because without the distribution platform, it doesn't matter how much marketing you do, you don't have anywhere for anybody to see the film because pre-internet, pre-mobile, pre-everything. So maybe with that as a kind of a backdrop, talk a little bit about the experiences and the challenges and the joys.
And
of
what made
did
you
with
all
the
think
film.
that these 4 people knew what the hell we were talking about?
Let me just read a couple of excerpts from an intro I did to Daughters when we screened it last fall at MoMA as kind of a memorial screening for Kino's founding president, Don Krem, who have been very happy and proud to be here tonight, but unfortunately couldn't be, can't be. Daughters of the Dust was one of those jubilant accidents in independent film distribution of the early 90s. It was a film that Kino International acquired mainly because it had won a prize for its cinematography at Sundance, a festival that was then swiftly expanding its influence following the worldwide success of Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotapes. And it was also a film that, frankly, Kino as a distributor only partially comprehended in its dramatic gravitas and its significance to African-American audiences and, of course, its eventual box office potential. We started to sense that Daughters might be a very special film for us when my colleague Jessica Rosner attended a pre-release screening in Philadelphia, I believe, of Black women historians. Some of you guys might have been there. The auditorium was packed, she reported, the response visibly emotional, rapturous. A few days later, we opened at Film Forum here in New York to capacity business, grossing over $30,000 in each of the first 2 opening weeks. That's still a huge gross there today, even in 2012 bucks. And then moving to the Village East for a 6-month run, something that's virtually unheard of in today's quick burn theatrical release world. I was in the Film Forum myself, I think on the 3rd or 4th night of the run, and I was watching the film. Oh, sorry. And I think early in the film, I believe it's Casey Moore says something like, "When I leave this place, I won't get to live in your light anymore." And I heard someone behind me start sobbing, and I said to myself, something special's going on here, and hopefully we can hang on for the ride. Julie was invited to appear on the Today Show, where no Kino filmmaker has ever gone before or since. The film played in over 200 U.S. markets, urban and rural, grossing nearly $2 million. Putting the company that was in financial peril at that time on a solid financial footing for many years to come. And I think 20 years later, we can still see the uniqueness of Daughters and taking us to that place, tapping into the multi-generational aspirations of that people where few movies have gone before and sadly since. It was the first feature film from an African-American woman director to have a bona fide theatrical release. and arguably opened some doors for many who followed Julie, including Leslie Harris's Just Another Girl on the IRT next year, Darnell Martin's I Like It Like That, Kazi Lemon's Eve's Bio, Nima Barnett's Civil Brand, and most recently Pariah, Dee Reese, a young filmmaker. So here we are. So.
Thank you, Gary. Grace, would you give us some of your wisdom around this film, please?
Well, when I think of Daughters of the Dust, I think of culture. I'm not a Geechee girl. I was not born in this country. I wrote, I think Fabio and Pearl kind of talked about a lot of what I was thinking about. I love food. I come from the Caribbean and South America. But, you know, we as Black people, not just Black women, as Black people, we're always trying to find ourselves. For 32 years, I worked in the film industry, the white film industry, on every conceivable film that you could think about. The Cotton Club, The Wiz, All That Jazz, Star 80, Silence of the Lambs, et cetera, and it was great collaboration because that's what filmmaking is all about. And 20 years later, again, I would like to congratulate you, Julie, and AJ, and all of your cast and crew for what you did. We are still searching for ourselves. We need writers to write our stories. I think that's the most important thing that I can see from having been in that industry for so very long. Throughout those years, I was always asking, where are the people who look like me? Why aren't they behind the cameras? And, you know, there were people like AJ who had been around, but, you know, I don't know all of your credits, AJ, but I know that on all of the films that I worked on, I wasn't seeing anybody that looked like me. So for me, it was very exciting when I heard about Daughters of the Dust. I felt as I'm looking at this film that I'd been there, and I've really never been to the South. But I felt like this was my culture. I'd been there, the food, you know, Pearl says we live in a global world, and I like to travel myself. That's part of my retirement now that I've retired. But I've seen so many, I've been through so many generations. I'm probably the oldest person in the room. But, you know, when I go to Venezuela, where I was born, the white Venezuelans ask me if I'm from Barlovento, because that's where the Black people come from. Or, you know, if I meet other Latinos on the street and they find out I'm like, where did you learn to speak Spanish? Are you from Honduras? You know, so it just goes to show that we are everywhere. We are just about every part of the world that you go, we find ourselves. And I'm working on it. Not in a movie, I'm working on the book. But it's true. And I saw that food, I'm like, I know that food. We cook that food, you know? And it's wonderful that today, based on this movie, I think people, as Black people, we are freer to comb our hair the way we want to. I cut off all my hair. I used to be, you know, the long hair, up down here, all straight and everything else. My children wear their hair in Afro styles or in braids or whatever, which is something in my time, 30 years ago, you didn't see. And, you know, it's people started feeling more comfortable about themselves. And I think this movie really helped to do that and continues to do so today. Thank you.
And Leslie, we'd like to give you a little moment to talk about how Daughters impacted your work.
Well, I just want to say that Julie Dash changed cinema history, not just in the United States, but around the world. Her film, when I think about it, back in the time of 1992, it was all about really the guys making the films. And as a filmmaker, and I knew Michelle from Women Make Movies, and I was at the time struggling to try to make a film, and I remember I was telling Michelle I wanted to make a feature so badly, and Julie's film came out, and it actually changed cinema history, and I don't think she really gets enough credit for that. We should see that stated more often, because we didn't see ourselves on screen at that time. It was really, in terms of a feature release, the entrepreneurial skills that this film had and that Julie has is phenomenal. And I think that when we look at it, and she actually paved the way for people like myself and Casey Lemons and Darnell Martin. And I mean, before we weren't there and we weren't being recognized. And I remember, and maybe I'm wrong, but I remember the New York Times, I think, had a front page picture of the lines that were going around the block and how phenomenal you guys did in terms of distributing the film. And that was on the front page, I remember, of the New York Times. So not only did this film like change, I mean, as a filmmaker, and I know other, and I'm speaking as a Black woman, because we were so ignored for such a long time. And to actually see this film and see the beauty of our hair, the wardrobe, the atmosphere, the cinematography, I think changed me as a filmmaker, because it made me see that this was possible, that we could see ourselves on screen. And we could write our own stories, because before then we weren't. And we could write the stories that reflected our cultures and diverse stories as well. So, you know, I just want to say that, you know, we're like in the presence of history right here. And I think that we don't really hear enough about that Julie did that. So thank you.
To balance out the business side, I think that I'm going to introduce something. There was a term used earlier, cultural grassroots, which my esteemed partner here actually coined, Marlon. Nobody had really ever done this. When they demographically distributed a film, it was always it was kind of, you know, women 18 to 49, men, kids. Nobody had ever crossed lines. So, and if those of you who were in the theaters in those days, you remember there were, you know, somebody said it, there were grandmothers, there were younger women. You know, it was a cultural grassroots. There were people who ideologically could connect with this film, and it was men and women. So I think that was a groundbreaking, and we were sought after actually after that, because people said, well, you guys did something. You struck a nerve somehow. And it was really a film, and we just lifted the cork off, and we poured that essence into the right glasses to start out with. And it was really something that, again, we all are, I think, moving towards writing about this, because we don't want that to die, to let people know that it did happen a while ago. The other thing I'm going to say quickly is,
uh-oh, Mark has props. Mark has props. Always has props.
Anybody ever see this T-shirt?
Yeah.
This is to remind you that there was a whole marketing piece behind this that was going on. There was the book ultimately that came out. There were those pieces. But to remind you even more so that that's what I took with me to the UK, because the British Film Institute distributed the film, and I was the fortunate one that got to go and spend a couple of weeks with June Giovanni and Karen Alexander to help them figure out how to market the film, with Mark Booth, to figure out the distribution model in the UK, where it was very, very successful. So not only was this a groundbreaking experience distribution-wise and theatrically in the US, but it also had a history overseas, which we cannot forget. We have an international story here. And if I can segue quickly, those of you who do know that I am associated with the Africa Channel, which is the second most exciting thing that I did with my life professionally. You know the first. And I think as we, from the channel, start to move now more diasporally, I will do a public announcement that I'm here to ask Julie if we can interview for our filmmaker series, because your story is as much a story of Africa and the diaspora as it has been a story for African American women.
Sure thing.
Okay.
Yes.
But the other corollary to that is we had no Africa Channel in those days to actually think about even doing an interview with an African-American female who
Nope,
had done a film
absolutely.
at this stage. So I think
Julie,
Julie
and
and
AJ,
AJ,
we'd love
yeah.
to hear your comments. And actually, I'd love AJ to talk a little bit, if you would, briefly. I know this. I know there's so many filmmakers and my students in the audience that want to know. First of all, does everyone realize that this film was made only with available light? Okay. Could you talk a little bit, AJ, about the technical aspects of the making of Daughters and you know, how does it look like it still looks today from 20 years plus back?
Do I have to talk about the technical aspect?
What would you like to talk about, AJ?
Well, I want to just mention a few things briefly. I do want to acknowledge two people that I don't see here tonight who, I mean, in terms of my own personal experience and involvement with the film or like critical. One would be Kay Shaw. I don't know
Yeah,
what
Kay is at South by Southwest. She couldn't be here, unfortunately.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But I just want to give a shout out to Kate. And also our other, in terms of Julie and my collaborator, key collaborator, would be Carrie James Marshall, who was the art director on the film and worked with Michael. And I just think, you know, sometimes like people talk about the look of the film, and I feel like, you know, they completely underestimate how it was sort of set by Carrie to a certain degree. So I want to give a shout out to them. And I was thinking earlier when people were, when I heard they were going to roast Julie, I was like, I don't have no parts of that. But when people were talking about how it changed people's lives, I think, you know, for me, clearly it changed my life more than any other single, I would say, individual, you know. I mean, to a certain degree, even in terms of like the arc of my career, I think, such as it is, this whole idea of like giving people a chance. I mean, I can't really imagine anybody, given the nature of the script, allowing me to shoot it, frankly. I don't think anybody would allow me to shoot it now, frankly. I mean, you know, if somebody had that script now, I don't know if I could get the job, you know. But what it really kind of speaks to, I think, is like how important just the whole issue of self-determinacy and autonomy are, because I think from the beginning when Julie described what she wanted to do, because initially Daughters was, it kind of grew out of 4 short films that Julie was going to do that were going to be an omnibus film. She had done one already, Illusions, which was set in the 40s. She was going to do one that was going to be set in the 60s, and that was going to be one that was set in what was then the future, 2010. And there was going to be one at the turn of the century. And as she was describing it to me, I was like, Julie, I don't know if we should like put all this energy into another short film. Why don't we just go for it as a feature, you know? And then once she sort of put her head down and said, yeah, that makes sense, this is what we're going to do. And I remember talking to Carrie, too, early on and just saying, I met Carrie based on an article that was in the paper. He said some funny things, and I just called him up on the phone, and we got to be friends. And I told Julie, I think we should get this guy to be the art director. And he had never done it. I don't think he'd ever imagined making a film. But it's just being in a position to make, I guess, what you call executive decisions. Again, just self-determinacy is like critical. Like you said, I could say a lot of things. I guess I want to say one thing that I've sort of said in public before. I made a note to myself here to be nice, because I have a tendency to not be nice, I've been told. But I do want to say one thing, and it's kind of a downer in a way, but I always think it's important to say, I've been to a couple of these sort of celebratory Daughters moments, and you know, it's great. I mean, I love like the way people's, you know, energies, you know, the film impacted people's lives and impacted my life, all this kind of stuff. But you know, one thing is true is like, I think Mark said it in terms of this whole question of sustainability, because to me, I think we shouldn't leave here without thinking about, you know, Daughters was made 20 years ago. And, you know, everybody told us like there was no market for that film. It just couldn't. I mean, I could talk for hours just about the comments we got. I never forget like one, somebody, I won't even mention the name, from the NEH, sent us this comment saying, well, what about the farmer in Idaho? That's why they didn't fund it, because it just had nothing for the farmer in Idaho, you know? I mean, I just like, you know, but what it really comes down to again and again is this whole idea that there's something not quite enough about black people's lives, you know, like it's like there's something, you know, black women's lives, you know? So But I do think, like, and I've said this, I've embarrassed Julie with this once, but I'll not embarrass her one more time, and I promise never to say it in public again. But to me, like Julie, frankly, it's like if Toni Morrison published The Bluest Eye and never got to publish another novel. I mean, let's be for real. I mean, Julie has done some really amazing films, but by and large, what she has done since Daughters is tried to be creative inside of very constrained situations where people gave her scripts, she uncredited, rewrote the scripts. I mean, we have a daughter together, and Julie, when she worked on the Rosa Parks story, and I'm not gonna get us in trouble, but because I know she tells me things, obviously, but you know, she was fighting with those producers and stuff, and I mean, essentially, she kind of got blackballed in Hollywood because she wrote this letter that was really, really hardcore about what she would not allow them to do with representations of Rosa Parks. And, you know, and I think she should be way more successful than she is. You know, and I mean, our daughter looks at both of us as like, wow, I just don't want to do what y'all do. You know, I want to be more successful. You know, but I actually, when Julie sent me the letter, I held the letter for a couple of days, and I said, well, I'm gonna keep this for my daughter because I really want her to know who her mom was. Because mom is a fucking warrior. I'm sorry, for real. You know, but again, it's like, not to get down about it, but it's like, you know, she should really have at least had one or two opportunities to do exactly what she wanted to do. I think we proved that there was an audience for us just following our own instincts, intuition, and vision and stuff. And you know, and I hope that comes to be, because it's really it's a shame, it's a tragedy. You know, for real. Just be serious.
I want to open it up for questions, but I want Julie to, if you want to say any closing remarks before we do that.
It's not that tragic. I've had the opportunity to play with some very expensive toys and with large budgets, and I was able to do and work with Angela Bassett, Cecily Tyson, Alfre Woodard, CCH Pounder, on Funny Valentines with Monica and Tyrese and lots of young folks on love songs. So I've got to do, you know, like 5 movies made for television, and I appreciate that, you know, and I'm grateful for it, and I learned a lot. It was not easy, but I don't think anything is really easy in this business. True, I would have loved to have been able to express myself more in a film, not exactly like Daughters of the Dust, but something even more complicated, more speculative fiction. But I do feel grateful for what I have, but I appreciate what you're saying that. But I am very grateful and very proud to have been able to work with so many, many talented people. And business people and creative people as well. And this is a wonderful reminder of all of that. And so I thank you for doing this and for working with us and for guiding us, because I certainly had no mind for distribution or anything like that. I'm just kind of like one track. What does it look like? What is it saying? What is it going to feel like? You know. So thank you very much, all you
Thank
Kino
you, Julie.
and KJM3.
You know, Michelle, I think that just a quick moment, just to reiterate, I mean, that's just so important, because, you know, this whole thing of struggle, it's really abstract, but, you know, the struggle is very intricate, but it's colloquial, it's every day, and it's in everything we do. And, you know, the people like Julie, and I can tell you from our own experience, well, speaking from my own experience, but I know my partners too, you know, it was quite a struggle and a sacrifice to actually step out like this, because, you know, once you go beyond, it's a lot of times you can't come back. Nobody's looking for you. And so you gotta, you know, you're gonna have to, once you step out there like this, you know, you gotta understand that this, you know, in certain contexts, particularly in the context of, you know, the sort of the information infrastructure. That's what we're talking about here. You know, people's minds. Once you step over a line there, nobody's gonna, you know, depending on what you're about, the people with the money are not gonna trust you after that. It's because you know they see where you're coming from, and this is a very powerful medium, and it's a strategic asset. It's a strategic asset that every government controls. It doesn't feel like that, doesn't look like that, but when you're in it like this, the way Julie was and the way we were out there like this, you find out how strategic it really is, and you run up against those walls, and you run up against the people who really don't play around. And so this is, you know, it was very important. I think AJ hit it right on the head. Is like, you know, it's about the infrastructure of self-sufficiency. You know, we don't have anybody to blame for any of this, but, you know, for us to walk away and say, well, this is what we're going to do. You know, this is what we're going to do. We're not looking for money. We have the money, you know.
Thank you, Marlon.
Let's get some questions.
Okay, so we're going to take some questions, and I want them to be questions. I know people have a lot to say, and we want you to say it. We really do, but we also want you to eat, and we want everybody to mingle and meet. So let's do this really diplomatically. I know we have 2 mics on either side of the room. Kojo wants to say one thing quickly.
One thing I want to say that kind of they spoke on, but I could speak on it from personal experience, is that I came to this film with a background and foundation of audience development in African American theater. And African theater, I worked on all the South African films. Phyllis Yvonne Stickney was a part of that, bringing those films, plays up to Harlem, like Asena Mali and Woza Alpert. So I brought the whole concept of we had to reach out to the group in the African American religious sector to support our culture. This was something we had been developing within the African American theater community. Woody King was very instrumental in that, and Boza and Vi Higginson. I worked with Mama I Wanna Sing. So we brought this concept of support from the community to the broad sense of civic organizations, the deltas, all these different things that had been tried before, but in the theater community, we were strategically developing that in the support of like Serafina and all those other plays, August Wilson's plays. I worked on all of that. So I came to this film with that experience to say that we must approach the group, the community, the groups in the community, the variations, to bring that to the support of the play. Because I remember one lady out in Queens, I'm gonna let it go. She came to the screening, and God bless her. She was from the church out there on Merrick Boulevard, right near the Black Spectrum Theater. And she came and seen the play, and she went back to that church, and she brought like 3 buses. You know, I remember her calling me up just so passionate, like she was like crying on the phone. But that was part of this whole grassroots element, is our community to come out, and once they see something like this, you know, it's like we would get them to come see the play. Come see this preview of this particular August Wilson's play. Once you see it, you're won over because it touches your heart. And so you're going to get on back then, like you said, it was no social media. People got on their phones or sent a fax or some other way, but they got that word of the passion and the conviction they have of bringing people into those, how they say, putting butts in the seats. Thank you.
We called it hand-to-hand combat. We would be at subway stations handing out flyers, hand into your hand. That's what we did.
Thank you, Kojo.
Did you get to Phyllis? Yes, thank you.
I just want to thank everyone. I remember seeing this card, KJM. And how are we doing today? How are we doing at KJM? And that's a question, a serious question, how are we doing? Because we have stuff that we want to bring to you to distribute. And I just want to thank you for representing all of the bouquet of women of color, all 52 of our hues. And you know how to reach me. I had to set another engagement, but I had to come. So I just want to come because I had to.
That's Phyllis Yvonne Stickney, everybody. Thank you, Phyllis. Well, briefly, KJM 3 has been dispersed for a while now, but while we were a company, we distributed about 25 short films and 8 feature films from all across the globe. And I think we all individually are doing things in our own work that continue to push the envelope and expand audiences for this work. Like I said earlier, we now are going to have a place to live, a theater to live in, with Miss Studios in Harlem, and the work that Mark is doing at the Africa Channel and Marlon is doing with his representation. We all are continuing to do this work, and Catherine is doing with her graphics. She works a lot with with filmmakers doing their graphic design, and she's amazing. She did our flyers, if you haven't seen them, amongst other things. But we all do our work individually and continue to do so because we still believe in the work. So, Edie, quickly.
My name is Edie Lynch. Michelle knows that I like to talk, but I promise it's only going to be a minute and a half. I want to regress for just a moment. 36 years ago, I got nominated for an Academy Award for my first feature documentary, Lost Control. And Pearl Bowser and Grace Blake and the great John Carter, who flew in from California to edit my film. And I'm telling you, it is so amazing to see that I missed Daughters of the Dust in 1992 for a very good reason, because my gifted son, R.B. Lynch, a composer, after 4 degrees and 5 languages, got schizophrenia. And I tried to get Reuben Cannon in Hollywood to do my story on my grandmother and grandfather, and he said, no, nobody was interested. I wanted him to do the story on my son, and we couldn't get together on that. But he did come in to do other things for me. I had this passion to finish this film, and I didn't know how to do it. And one night, I was putting my key in the door, and my son said, Mom, don't stand over there. They can steal your voice over there. And I said, R.B., we are so broken poor tonight, they can have my voice. And he said, don't worry about my life, because it is going to happen. They're already playing my music in heaven along with Mozart and Ellington. And I had the great fortune of Abby Lincoln recording my son's music all over the world. And I say to you that your film was so beautiful. Every frame was like a painting. Every single frame. It was like 2 films going on at one time. The film that the individual could identify with, the film that the collective voice of us could all identify with. And it's just an amazing memory thing. And you know that that's going to last forever. That kind of energy doesn't go away. Like the kind of energy in Michelle's class. You can't get in her class. I mean, it's so amazing. And I thank you with all of my heart for this film, because it's one that will stay with me forever, and it gives me more courage to get out my script and do my grandmother's story. But I did put it up on the website, on my website, Stories from the
You really
Heart.
nailed it in terms of the memory and having 2 parallel stories going to visuals and all of that. You got it. Yeah.
Vaughn, back here in the back.
Thank you so much. Julie, thank you for the gift that you gave all of us. And what I think, I'm Vaughn Harris. I'm one of Michelle's former students, and she is my cinema mother. I'm a filmmaker, too. My concern in watching the film, and I've been tweeting about it, Facebooking about it, screening it again after so many years. I grew up in South Carolina, and it reminds me so much of the South Carolina culture and the strength of the women there, and just that story that you really don't see much. You know, you see a lot about the help and those kinds of women, not to diss those, but it's such a powerful story of such strong women. My question is, do you feel like this film would be made today?
By someone like me. It wasn't made then by other people. It has to be made independently. Yes. So I would say yes, this film would be made every day if there were people who had the resources to make it, because there are filmmakers like myself who are ready to go and who are making these films, and a lot of times they make them and they don't get distribution. So once again, Kino and KJM3. They
Something
brought
like
this to the
American
public.
Playhouse, Julie, doesn't really exist presently either as a
That's right.
as a
Right.
facilitator, right? That's a
That was
loss.
one of the things, yeah, like, it's not just the venues that have gone away, the independent venues, but the funding for it, because this was, this money was, that we got for this, we got it from American Playhouse, National Endowment for the Arts, National Black Programming Consortium with Mabel Haddock. There was Women Make Movies. There was so many different funding sources that came
AIVF,
together
that
to
exist
make
anymore.
this thing happen. That's why in many ways it was, you know, one of the miracles of the diaspora that happened.
Somebody has the mic here.
I do. Hi, my name is Marceline. First of all, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. This has been amazing and inspirational. I saw it when I was 10 years old and changed my life. But this question is really for Julie and for Leslie, and kind of piggyback off his question. For young filmmakers, do you have any advice as we try to make it and make our films heard and seen?
Well, I guess the main thing is persistence, and just make the film that you want to make, especially when you're young. You could always work in and make money by, you know, directing commercials or other things, but you must make the films that you want to make. You can't let someone tell you what's going to sell and what's not going to sell, because even they don't know. They're just talking. No one knows what's going to sell and what the situation is going to be. So give birth to your dreams as often as you can in between your day job, let's say.
And I just like to add, I agree with everything Julie says, and I just like to add that I think that a lot of times it's good to work with each other. Like, let's say no one's working, and everyone wants to, someone wants to do cinematography, or someone wants to do wardrobe, and someone wants to act. Really get together and like culminate all your frustrations and do something positive, and really work with your friends and your, you know, people who are on your level. You know, sometimes I think we think about always going above and trying to get people who are more experienced in the business, when I think that what the 90s were doing, especially for African American filmmakers and that kind of renaissance, was that we were working together. And even for my film, we worked with people who, you know, who hadn't worked on a film before. And I think that that's important, that, and also to keep your vision. You can only, you know, make the film you want to make, because most of the time when you get to Hollywood and you get to these big budgets, you can't make the film you want to make. And that's just the reality of it. So, you know, really appreciate where you are now, and with the new technology, I think it can be done. I also think that one thing that needs to be improved upon is that I do think we have a lot of money in our own communities, and we still aren't tapping into that, and we still aren't supporting the artists. And I think that that's something that needs to be looked at very carefully, why we aren't doing that. Because we can change the image. I mean, this film shows that, Daughters of the Dust shows that we can change things. I think we just have to work together and find someone who can help fund your projects. And I think we're out there. I just think that we haven't really gotten together as much as we should.
Okay, back here, and we're going to take one or two more. And then we're
First, my thanks to the panel for the gift of your presence, and Julie for your presence and for the film. It's a film that has stuck with me, and it wasn't just because Sherilyn Bruce told me to come and see it, and she didn't bring me back the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth times I've seen it. But it is a film that I continue to use when talking about, as we're telling our own stories and finding ourselves. When I look at retention and the issues of African retention, the film is so eloquently a comment on that whole process. But I'm particularly interested and like to hear you comment on and give some context to one of the very rare representations of the Islamic presence among the enslaved Africans who arrived here. Some 8% of Africans, and as far as I know, yours is the only representation of that presence in film.
Okay, very briefly, there's a book out, a text about the Islamic presence in the Sea Islands, and the character Bilal that I created, he actually lived years before 1902, where I have him depicted. But I wanted him to be in this story to give presence to his religion and to his practice and to his family's lineage and legacy, which remains there into Sea Islands today. I also wanted to have this a part of the film because growing up here in Queensbridge, I used to hear a Muslim doing their morning call to prayer in the projects, and I never knew what it was, but it never seemed odd either. So there are all kind of many religions and that exist here among us in the diaspora. But when Hollywood depicts us on the screen, we usually just see the Baptist religion and the choir and the church choir singing. And I wanted to show more because this film is about demystifying some things as well as opening up the doors to what we really are about and what all of the wonderful things that we have through African retention that are just not, shown to the general public. But I've experienced them within my family, and I know you've experienced it within your families, and the whole ritual way that we prepare our meals and the cuisine is just, it's just something that's never touched upon in, I guess, the mass media.
Thanks.
Yes.
Oh, I want to thank you also for a wonderful presentation. It was great to see it again. But can you say something about the cast, the ensemble group, the actors, and how did you find them and pay them, and how long did it take to make the movie?
We shot it in 23 days, but to putting together the money to finance to make it, it was like a 16-year process, and I'm going to speak very quickly here, but kind of agreeing with what Leslie said earlier about working with like-minded people and your fellow artists. AJ and I met on the set of a Charles Burnett film that we were working on, and he's a well-known independent filmmaker, and we worked on some other films together before working on Daughters of the Dust. And most of the actors, like Barbara Oh and Adisa Anderson, I had worked with before, or they had worked in other independent black films. And so when I casted this film, I wanted to kind of pay homage to the whole notion of independent black film by bringing in those people. The lady who played Coralie Day, who played Nana Penzance, she worked in Haile Garima's films and in Charles Burnett's films, and I had worked with them, worked with her before. I'd worked with Barbara before, so it was like a homecoming to bring together all these faces that we know from independent black cinema.
And on that note, I knew the hands
I
were
have the
gonna go.
mic, so.
Who has the mic?
Here, behind.
Oh, I can see. Okay.
Can I ask? Okay. This is the first time I saw this movie. I was blown away, like everybody else. I didn't grow up here. I'm from Suriname, South America. I studied in Holland, and that's where I realized, like, that we lack, how black movies, American movies or black movies in general, how we miss that there in Europe. So my question is actually for the man of the African channel, sorry to say it.
Mark.
Like, how did you, because I always feel like even the blockbuster movies have a hard time showing in Holland, because they wouldn't show them, So what I like to know is what was the plan to distribute it in the UK? And the UK may be easier because the language is English. So I wanted to know the plan behind the distribution there. Maybe we can use it there because my dream is to hold an African-American festival ever in Holland.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I just want to know, what makes you say the black blockbuster movies don't play in Europe? Because that's the general myth that's been thrown out to us over the years.
Because I lived there.
Yeah, I know.
I lived there, and I have to say I saw Spike Lee in a movie. I think that's the last. That is so. There was a time where you could see some of the blockbuster movies, but now I have a fairly big website, relatively big website, where I get feedback, Going Natural, Cruza.com, which is a Dutch website for natural hair care and stuff. So I have feedback, and when the movies come out here, I ask them like, do you see this movie? One of the movies that I think the people should see is the one that Denzel, The Great Debaters.
Right.
It wasn't
Because
there.
I'm wondering whether or not you don't see them because they're not sold overseas, rather than that the overseas buyers aren't purchasing them. I don't know.
I think, to be honest, I think it's the same excuse, like people aren't interested. This won't be selling
That's
here.
pretty much it.
Yes, that's
because I remember last time I was in the Netherlands, I was watching, I don't know the name of the TV show, but Urkel. I was watching Urkel in the Netherlands, and I know that's television, but everywhere I go, when I'm in Italy, you just flip around and, I could get, a black show in a second, but they always say that they're not playing there, so I was just curious.
It's really
I'm
backwards.
sorry.
And,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. We have to
Okay.
close up. Mark, you want to respond?
Just very quickly. So the model in the UK is that BFI was doing a video release of Daughters of the Dust because of a relationship, I guess, that came through Kino. And this gentleman, Mark Booth, who, again, is another pioneer, basically had set up a model where he went to theaters around different parts of the UK, and he programmed one night a month for African and African diaspora films. So what happened is when I went over, it was really to give them a little bit of science about what we had done, but he then programmed a night for Daughters, and it turned into a number of nights because the film was so popular there, and that kicked off BFI then doing a direct-to-video release of the film. Yeah, and they kind of bicycled the print, which is somewhat what we did as well. We had limited prints, so we would drive Gary crazy, but bicycling them around the country. And the other answer to your question, though, is really what Julie is saying, is that there's a lot of outlets across Europe and across parts of Africa and South America, but those buyers are not necessarily requesting the movies because it is a pretty close club. So the majors are out there wooing people, taking them to lunch, all of that, and independent filmmakers don't have that kind of clout and don't have that kind of cash to do those same things.
So the bottom line is we have to be our own deep pockets, and we have to support each other in our work. We have to continue the dialogue that we started with R2 last year, now this year, and going into next year. If you have not signed our email list, we will connect everyone via email. Make sure you do outside. And I'd love to thank our panelists and our filmmakers. And I'd like to invite you to stay and have some Low Country food with us. Thank you very much. And some wine.